Hi, I'm Catherine. Welcome to my making adventure. This is a video podcast where I share all of my crafty adventures, and today is March 21st, so this is my March updates. Let's see, what else do I say? I live in the rural Midwest with my husband and our 3 daughters. We also have 2 adult sons. I have knitting and sewing and a little bit of crochet to share with you today. All right, I am wearing my color tip tee, which I think I just finished in December because I finished all of my big projects before the 12 Cast Ons make along. So this is a pattern by Emily Curtis. The pops of pretty color are all dyed by Forbidden Fiber Co. And it was in a sheep punk mini skein set that was gifted by Stephanie of Texas Peach Knits, and as like a prize, which also my first finished object is also from Stephanie, so keep that in mind. I participated in Make Along and got the yarn as a prize. It was a really nice prize. Yeah, so we have summer weather right now, so this tee works out well for that. It hasn't gotten a lot of use with being finished in December. We had some cold January, but yeah, I feel like I have a lot to talk about today, and my brain is like going 12 different ways with all of the things. So we'll just jump in to finished objects. I finished my stack of book socks by Sock Witchery. The yarn is Chicken Lady Fiber Arts in the Highland sock, and the colorway is called Hold Me Closer Tony Danza, and it knit up wonderfully. It was so fun to work with, and the socks are nice to wear. My one issue with this pair of socks is clearly my own fault, but somehow I made one sock probably like 10 rows longer than the other. I suppose there's a chance it's just 5. I don't even know. I put stitch markers in. I recounted the ribbing the second time I knit the sock, but maybe that is the issue. I ripped out 10 rounds of ribbing on the second sock to make sure that it matched. I don't think that's the issue. Yeah. I used stitch markers every 10 rounds, so I don't know how that happened, but it's obvious when I wear them. So that is my biggest complaint at the moment. I do really love otherwise how they turned out. I also do think I tried to knit them extra tall because it always looks fun when people do that. But my boots aren't, my shoes that I wear in the winter aren't that tall. And so they look too tall, I feel like, sticking out over my boots. So I might not knit my socks this tall in the future, even though I did like it. Unless I get taller boots. So I also knit a pair of baby socks out of the scraps of this yarn that I gifted to a couple from church who just had their first baby girl. They have 2 sons, and now they have a baby girl. And I use the Perfect Newborn sock pattern as a guide. I did do like a 1x1 broken rib texture on it, which isn't part of the pattern. If you can hear that, one of my children is doing something. It's rest time or quiet time. I'm not sure what that is, but we're not gonna worry about it because they're not hollering at me. So yeah, I did also knit baby socks with this, and I don't even know if I have a picture of them, but I did talk about them in my vlog. So if you watch that, you've seen them. Stack of book socks. And then my next finished object is a sewn object. I sewed this apron for myself. I don't really know that it's how to show it. It has cute ruffles and pockets and the ties cross in the back. The pattern is by Ruthann Zimmerman, and I mentioned this in my blog, but I'll say it here. I would loosely call it a pattern. It's a template, is maybe more appropriate. There is something you can print to cut out the pattern pieces, which essentially the only piece that you really need that for is the bodice. And maybe these ruffle pieces. The rest are square or rectangular pieces. And then the pattern doesn't have any instructions for how to piece the fabric together. There is a tutorial video that you could watch, that I did watch, but I ended up making quite a few adjustments from that because in the video, there are raw edges. I mean, you zigzag stitch them, but there's still raw edges visible on the back side of the waistband from the bodice, and I didn't want that. So I figured out a way to close that in. I think also the skirt pieces would have had a raw edge on the back side of the waistband, and I like fully enclosed those in the waistband. The fabric was all thrifted. This is from the library craft exchange, which means I got it for free. It does have a stain, I don't know, but I put it on the inside of the bodice, so who cares? And the green was like, sorry, it's dirty. I've used it. I haven't washed it since I used it, but the apron is dirty, is good, because that means then my clothes weren't dirty with that. The green was a thrifted curtain that was like, I think 50-50 cotton linen. And this, whatever this is from the library, is pretty linen-y too. So I thought that works really well for this project. I do have a little bit extra fabric, but it really worked out well to use the two together. So I'm very pleased with that. I might make another apron like this since I have the pattern. I don't know. For now, I just have the one. Maybe a second one would be nice if I came across more cotton linen fabric like this, like that would be lightweight for an apron. Maybe I'd make a second. Next is also a sewn project. This is another Hinterland dress. This is my Scrappy Hinterland dress. A long time ago, I sewed the bodice of this Hinterland with just, it didn't have snaps yet, but the rest of it was sewn. And I had anticipated using this fabric for the skirt. However, once I had the bodice ready and I was gonna cut out the skirt, I held them up together and I just really didn't feel like this is like springy and bright and this is more of a muted. I just didn't really feel like they were gonna match well in tone. They might have a lot of overlapping colors, but the tone of the fabric was different. So I sat on it. I even went to Walmart and looked through their plain fabric to see if there's anything I wanted to use for a skirt. And I looked through my stash to see if I had enough of anything. And then I remembered that I had used this to sew something for my girls. Like I called it like a Lego mat. Like it was a big circle and they could play their Legos on it, and then when they were done they could just like pull the string. It didn't actually work for us. It was a nice idea. It works for some people. It did not work for us. My girls like their treasures to be like securely on top of the Lego bin and not in a mess of Legos. So anyway, they weren't using it. So I took it apart and I was like, that actually has a good tone for matching my dress. So that was the inspiration for getting me going again on this project. However, I didn't have enough of it to make the full skirt the way that I wanted. But since I had recently, like around the new year, gone through all of my fabric and reorganized it, actually I think it was February, I knew that I had like little bits of this dark fabric and some blue and some purple, and even I had some navy. And so I was like, I bet if I piece this together, I can have enough for a skirt. And then I spent a whole weekend hemming and hawing over how to piece it together. And this is what I did on the front. So I did one weird panel, and then the green, and then more of that darker blue. And then on the back, I didn't patchwork the middle panel. I just used that blue bordered by the green. And then it has a lighter blue and a lighter purple on the edge, just to use up the scraps that I had. Like I didn't have enough of this light blue to do, or the light purple, I don't think, to do very much of it. And I wanted to use as much of this green stripe as I could, since I was taking apart the other thing. And I think I used almost all of this navy with the flowers. Yeah, and then I added in a bit of that fabric that I initially thought I'd use. I felt like it was like a good, I don't know, this was my original plan and it didn't work, so I came up with this. Just a reminder of the process of it. And I really thought that this red maroony would kind of go with the different, there's like a purpley red and the lighter pink. I don't know, I just thought that would be fun. So, and then yeah, the light purple and the blue, light blue show up on the front as well with a plain navy. Now, one additional challenge I faced, so mathing seam allowance and all the different pieces was a challenge. Especially I had to decide like how many panels I wanted on the front and on the back, and then like account for the seam allowance when I was sewing the panels together, and then, you know, do the same thing for the back. Another challenge that I faced was this navy fabric actually ended up being super see-through, and I didn't, my husband warned me and I ignored him because it was like all the fabric is light and see-through. And then I sewed it with the other fabric and I held, specifically this back panel, I held it all up and I could see right through this, but not right through the others. So it's like, oh, you mean like that see-through. So what I ended up doing was I have a very lightweight interfacing and I just applied that. So after I had seamed it all together, I cut the interfacing so that it was just slightly smaller than that piece, and I attached it. That was before it was, you know, sewn as a skirt. It was just the front skirt panel and the back skirt panel. And so I did the same on the front where that fabric came. So that was an extra challenge. Additionally, I somehow must have mismeasured some of my pieces. So my front skirt and my back skirt panels, once I had sewn them together, were not rectangles. The bottom was like like some pieces were longer and some pieces were shorter. And I didn't know, I mean, I could have measured again, but it wouldn't have really mattered. I didn't know if I like, some of them were too long or some of them were too short, but it really didn't matter. There wasn't anything I could do to make them longer. So I just tried to even it out as best as I could. And that made the hemming a lot trickier because I probably should have just got my mat and my rotary cutter out again and lined it all up and figured it out, and I just didn't. So I was feeling frustrated and I didn't want to spend all the time, and I probably should have done that. I did, and I don't know what's like proper sewing technique, but I did go ahead and like after I had seamed the front panel and the back panel, I zigzag stitched all those edges. I pressed my seams out towards the edge of the skirt, so the middle piece out and out. I didn't know if I should press them open, but I didn't really want an open seam. So yeah, I pressed them out. I don't know. And then yeah, the rest of it is like usual, but because of that difference in length, I had trouble getting the bottom hem. You're supposed to like fold it up a 1/4 inch and then 1 inch. And I had trouble catching that 1/4 inch in my first, like all the way throughout the hem. Most of the time I had it, but there were a few places where I hadn't caught it. So I did like a second round of hemming. Like you can see, I don't know, maybe you can see there's 2 rows of stitching at the hem. And this is actually right here on the blue is where I started and stopped. And I don't think it's super noticeable, or it looks, I don't think it looks funny there. My stitching is certainly not perfect, but I find that that's the case with my other ones also, and no one says anything, and I don't notice when I'm wearing it. I did also use this stripy green fabric for the pockets, which is kind of fun because the green doesn't border the pockets at all. So it's just, that was fun. Choosing what fabrics to use where and how to lay it out was a big project in and of itself. So yeah, mostly I envisioned just wearing this around the house, but I did wear it to church once. But more of like a home-based hinterland because it's so scrappy. I feel like I talked about that too much. This is my 4th hinterland dress. I still have the first one. I don't wear anymore. The second 2 I still wear all the time, but the second one I sewed, the fabric is already like starting to wear. So I know I need more. I was thinking I would make one, like a lavendery one for Easter, but I don't think I have time to do that, and that makes me sad. I also don't have fabric currently for it, and I had told myself I had to work through some of my excess fabric before I would buy fabric for it. So I guess I'm still in that like working through excess fabric stage. One more finished object. I told you I had a lot to talk about today. I finished my daughter's Bean and Olive sweater. So this is a Bean and Olive by Andrea Mowry. And this is the first pattern I used to knit my daughter's sweaters when my 6-year-old was 4 and my 4-year-old was 2. And now the baby wears the smaller one and my 4-year-old wears the larger one, and my 6-year-old was sad because she didn't have one. So I was looking through my stash to figure out how I could make her one without purchasing yarn. And I had this main color was gifted from Amy of Noble Character Crafts. And I had 3 skeins of it, and it was 100 grams, Patton's wool worsted. So the Bean and Olive is a DK pattern, but I was like, I can make it work with worsted. So then for the color work, I decided to use scraps of fingering weight held double. Almost all of this is our hand-dyed yarn except for the purple. We do have a purple, I just had more of this other purple. So I have 2 different yarns held together with the purple. One is this, the Forbidden Fiber Co. purple, and one is just a plain purple that I got from Jennilee of Wyoming Knits as a prize for her Scrappy knit along she did last year. It came with like a sock set, but I just used a little bit of the mini skein. This is our, oh, I should go up here. This is our raspberry color. This is our blueberry color. This is an attempt, like a one of a kind, we'll call it. We didn't quite get what we wanted, so I've been knitting with it, that green. And this orange is also not exactly what we have at the shop. We have a carrot orange that's a little bit less red than this. And the yellow is also not currently available, although I really want my husband to work on that. He's the main dyer. So she loves it. It is enormous on her. And she loves it because her least favorite thing is when she outgrows the sweaters. She has actually been complaining to me like, last year you made my sweater too small because now it doesn't fit me anymore. And so when I was making this one for her, I said, I'm gonna make it too big because it's almost the end of winter and I want you to be able to wear it next year. And so the sleeves go here, like fully past her fingertips. It goes all the way, you know, all the way over her hips, and she loves it. It's been 80 and 90 degrees the last couple days in the Midwest, which is crazy, and she's still been wearing it in the morning or even yesterday afternoon when she was upset. She puts it on because it feels like a hug from mom. So, and that just makes me so happy. Oh, fun part of this is related to yarn management. So because I knew I was making it oversized, I knit the ribbing on the cuffs extra long so it could be folded up. Now she's probably never going to do that because it hides the color work I did at the cuff. Also, this is a modification. Color work at the bottom is not called for in the pattern, but why wouldn't you add more hearts to this sweater? But if you fold up the cuff, you cannot see the color work on the sleeves, and she loves the color work on the sleeves. So I don't think I can convince her to do this, even though it makes it fit her better. If you've ever had a 6-year-old oldest daughter, you probably know what I mean. And then the neck, I pretty much knit to pattern. And so for the bottom ribbing, I decided I wanted to do 8 rounds, which is what I had ended up doing at the neck to get the recommended length. I did the sleeves twice that, but I was running low on yarn. So I was like, well, I can rip out my swatch if I need to. I did not need to. This was the end when I finished binding off. I had 2 other little pieces, 2 different balls of yarn. The yarn would have 1 ply broken, and then it must have happened twice, yeah. And then like this much later, a few feet later, less than 2 yards later, the whole yarn was broken. So I don't know if like when it was running through the machine noticed that 1 ply broke and then it cut it, but it's just delayed, or why that would happen twice. So I cut it when the 1 ply was broken, and I would like go to knit the next bit in and then run out of yarn again. So I cut those whole little pieces out, and I was prepared to use them to help me with the bottom ribbing if I needed it. But I actually ended up with that much extra, 3 little bits. Here's my swatch. A big old swatch. I think I had only done 4.5 millimeters of US 7. That's what I swatched in. And that is what I ended up using for the main, no, for the color work I used a US 7, but for the main knitting I used a US 6. So yeah, from 300 grams of worsted yarn to that much left over at the end, I'd say that's a pretty big win. And that is super fun to use up the yarn just like that. Thank you, Amy, for the ability to make my daughter a sweater. Now she can wear it again. I'm just piling everything up in here. I don't know if you can see it or not. Hopefully it's not distracting. Those are all my finished objects. I don't think I have time right now to go into my WIPS because I have 1, 2, 3, 4-ish. Nope, 5 WIPS because there's socks that aren't on here. So yeah, I don't think I have time for that right now. So we're gonna pause and I'll come back another day, another time. We shall see. I'm back and I'm here to talk about 5 WIPS. My family is heading out on a little adventure. So there might be a little bit of noise right now, but it should be gone soon. The first WIP I'm gonna share about is my day 5 cast ons. Day 5 cast on for the 12 cast ons make along. So I cast this on in January and it is the 4 points blanket pattern by Purl Soho, but I'm knitting with a bulky yarn. I think it's even more than bulky. And I'm using 9mm US 13 needles, which I do not enjoy. Anyway, I have this yarn and I'm trying to use it to make this blanket. I have finished one of the 4 sections of the blanket. It is massive. It is a triangle. Can you see that? So, this is the cast on edge, and then you knit up from there. So I have a marker here. So maybe I was that far last time. Maybe I knit all this since I last showed you this blanket. I have failed with my math. So I have a certain amount of this yarn that I'm trying to use up as much as possible in this blanket. So I knit a little swatch. I figured out how much I thought each stitch would take me, and I mathed out like how many stitches for 1/4 of the yarn, and then use that to figure out how many stitches to cast on. Well, I was supposed to use 400 grams, I think, for each section of the yarn because I have just over 1,600 grams. And this used 539 grams. So that's a problem. I was pretty sure it was using more than 25% of the yarn. This is pretty close to 1/3 of the yarn. So I was thinking if it used half, I'll knit a second triangle and I'll seam them together through this middle diagonal, and then I'll have a square blanket, which would work if I use like pretty close to half or even a little bit less than half. Like say, 40%. But no, I have used just under 33%. So I've been trying to debate what to do. I could rip it all out and knit something like a jelly roll blanket just with all the same yarn so that I was like kind of in control of when the blanket ended. I could use up as much as as much as possible. Or I could knit a second square, seam them together or a second triangle, seam them together like I talked about, and like pick up and knit a border around the outside. The problem is once I've knit the second square, once I've knit the second triangle and seam them into a square, I will still have almost 500 grams of this yarn left. Because I've used 539 and I have 1,168 left. So even accounting for yarn for seaming, I feel like I'm probably gonna have like 500 grams left. So I think what I'm gonna do, knit another triangle like this, seam them, then pick up, seam them so that my cast on edges are like the top and bottom, pick up stitches along this side where the garter stitches going that way and knit back and forth a few rounds before binding off with an I-cord, and then do the same thing on the other side. So be more of a rectangular shape that's sort of modular. I can do those extra sections section by section, and then if I have enough yarn, I might like pick up all the stitches across the top and bind off with an I-cord, and pick up all the stitches across the bottom and bind off with an I-cord, depending on if I have the yarn and if I have the bandwidth. But I really do think that my next step is simply to knit another one of these. Now, unfortunately, like, I feel like it's pretty obvious when I've added, like, especially right there, when I've added in yarn, it kind of gets double thick for a little bit. And I need to trim up all my ends. But fortunately, I did use a lot of the smaller balls already. So hopefully there won't be so many ends. Like, this is pretty big. Hopefully there won't be so many ends when I knit the second triangle. I cast on 80 stitches and the first part is super slow going. So I might just let it sit for a little bit before I pick it up again and work on it. It is definitely not a priority. Although I would like it finished this year. So having knit 1/3 of the yarn up in 2.5 months, we could call it 3. I think I should try to finish the second triangle like by June or July, so that I can do the rest of it before the end of the year. Maybe even before December, because you know how that like before Christmas knitting gets. Yeah, so that is that. That original pattern is for fingering weight yarn, and you could use 4 different colors and it would look super cool. I don't know how many yards it uses for the fingering weight. I think I'm gonna look into it though. Well, actually, I think if I work on learning to knit blankets with fingering weight yarn, I'm gonna be looking into the Stella quilt pattern, because apparently my husband wants me to make one of those. So that's a long forward thinking plan, but yeah. Okay, so that's that blanket. Next up, another 12 cast ons. Oh, I think I might have forgot to mention that the socks I finished, that I showed during my finished objects section, were my day 1 cast on for the 12 cast ons. And so that is another 12 cast ons project that's done. I have, I think 4 current ones, but one of them I need to cast on more parts of. All right, next up, this is my sweater. I cast on this day 12 of the 12 cast ons, and this is the Storm sweater by Petite Knit. I am reclaiming yarn from other sweaters. It's a long story, but it's really nice wool, and it's working up really wonderfully for this pattern. And I have knit 1 section past the underarm, and I have run out of one of my balls of yarn. I think what I would really like to do next is knit the collar, but I had also told myself that I would save the ribbing for the end in case I ran out of the one color of yarn that I have the least of. So I haven't been able to make a decision on that. The other thing is that because I'm reclaiming yarn, there's a lot of yarn management up front, and I haven't done that. So I have to take the ball of frogged yarn and separate it into 2 balls because I'm blending 2 different colors. And so I haven't done that. And before I continue on the body, I should do that. But I do think I want to knit the body longer before I do the sleeves. Otherwise the body will probably feel like a slog. I think in the pattern, you only do 4 or 5 of these sections in the main body before you do the ribbing. But I'm guessing I'm gonna need to add sections for my personal preference with sweaters, although I've been toying with like making it a little bit more cropped, but I don't think I want it too cropped. I have a long torso, so if it gets too cropped, it doesn't work. I am using US 5 3.75 millimeter needles for this. I think the pattern calls for 6s. The storm sweater pattern is by Petite Knit. I think that with, I don't think that I checked gauge with the 5s. My gauge with the 6s was too big, and I know that I wouldn't want to go any smaller. It's quite dense. Like, it's not too bad, but working with the yarn on this size of needle, I wouldn't want to go down just for the sake of my fingers. Come here, little ball of yarn. One thing that's interesting is, and I don't know how much of this I've shared, so sorry if I'm being redundant. But the 2 yarns I'm using, one of them I have more more weight. I guess I don't know yardage, more weight of. I have like maybe 600 grams of one and 400 grams of the other. But the one that I have more of, I'm getting less yardage per weight. So I put like 2 balls that weighed the same on this one. And then I actually already added a second little ball in. So yeah, I'm getting more yardage out of the one that I have less grams of. So I'm thrilled by that, because that means that they're gonna be like closer to equal. And I don't really want to have to do, a bunch with just the other one, with just the one that I have more of. I'm trying to, if possible, like weave in the ends while I go, so that I don't have a bunch of ends to weave in later. I'm itching to get back on to working with this, but I'm also not really looking forward to getting all the yarn ready. And I probably just need to suck it up and do that. So that is the storm sweater. My next one is also a 12 Cast Ons project. This is day 7. This is the Finest Kind sweater, which is a pattern by Alicia Plummer. I am knitting it with Lion Brand Wool Ease in this brown heather color, Nature's Brown. And this is the first skein of this that I have. I have 3 more. I originally cast this on as part of the 12 Cast Ons in January. And I made good progress, and then I blocked it and let my husband try it on and compare it to sweaters he liked. It's bottom up, so like try it on, I mean loosely, like around his waist. And he thought it was too big. So I sized down and recast on in the middle of February. So this is about a month's progress on this. It's on small needles, so it's wider than this. But I put it on, I think, my 22-inch cords with my, yeah. So it's just probably double this width at least. So yeah, I'm enjoying working on this. It's like knit purl texture, but it's really consistent, so it's repetitive. I don't need to look at the pattern. Right now, I just knit, 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 knit. My plan is to go until I run out of this yarn and then measure it and compare it to sweaters. And I'm worried about starting the underarm stuff at the right time. So yeah, the pattern I think says a certain amount in inches. So I'll have to compare to that. But I'm also not sure, like the other sweater I've knit for him is the stick season sweater. And so I want to compare the schematics of that, like the armhole depth, compared to the schematics of this one to make sure I can get it like the right length, if that makes sense. So, because how much length you have in the sleeves impacts how long the final, where this will fall on you. So that is The Finest Kind, which is a pattern by Alicia Plummer. And a couple more still to share. The next one is a quick, there's not a lot to see, but I have cast on 3 cats similar to the one that I knit during 12 cast ons. So here's my finished cat that I knit as part of 12 cast ons. And now I have cast on 3 more. And they aren't together at all. They all have a head and ears. And I've decided, I tried to knit, this is a crocheted project. I had tried to crochet the mouth part different than the pattern calls for. And I decided that I do not, in fact, know better than the original pattern designer, and so I have to go back and re-crochet all the mouth pieces. So here's one color is an orangey color. Then once all the mouth pieces are done, I can put together the head of each cat, and then I'll be moving to the next part. Here is that head, pink, like a rose, I don't know, a dark pink. And like an aqua. This is Hobie fingering cotton 8/4 in their Friends line. And I like this yarn a lot, just for, it's working well for this. The hook size I am using is a 2.75 millimeter clover hook. And I am doing these for a friend. Not a lot of joy until, like, I love this. This brings me joy. But the little parts of it are not necessarily my favorite. I was hoping to finish those 3 cats in March, and I am way off of that goal because I think the original plan was like for me to finish the heads maybe by the 10th, and it is the 21st. So now that I finished my daughter's sweater, I'm hoping that I can give that a little bit more attention. However, it is tricky because it requires attention, like focus, and a lot of my knitting time does not have, like, is not my only focus. I have children running around me, or it's the very end of the night and my brain needs a rest, or I'm multitasking. So, all right, one more project that I'm working on, and that is a pair of Scrappy Socks I'm knitting for my husband. I knit him DK weight socks at Christmas time, but he said, I would really like to try some fingering weight ones. And I said, okay. So I have finished one. The heel, toe, and the little bit at the cuff is opal yarn left over from socks I knit for my second son for Christmas. And the yarn was gifted from Dawn, a crafty Dawn. And the rest of the yarn is yarn my husband dyed, little scraps of it. This is the blueberry, and then we have a grape, raspberry. These 2 are the same, or these 3 are the same that were in my daughter's sweater then that aren't available as they are here. There's something close to this. I don't know if the kale is a little darker than this. I don't know if that's on line yet or not. And I'm on the heel flap of the second. So, progress, I think I'm like 2/3 of the way through the heel flap, and then I'll have to do the heel turn and pick up the stitches. I put the heel in the middle of that green stripe. I don't know if you can see that. So that's where I'm at. The green yarn is hiding out in here until I'm ready to pick it back up after I'm done with the heel. I've been keeping track of how much yarn I use for each color. I don't know, is that interesting? It's always interesting to me. So when I started, I had 16 grams of opal yarn. And after the first sock, I had about 10. So I don't know why I put approximately 10. Oh, I think I hadn't finished when I weighed it. So I hadn't like cut the yarn yet, but I knew I was gonna finish and I wanted to take it upstairs to finish it. So I weighed it and guessed. I think that means that the toe took like 2 grams and the heel and the cuff together took like 4. Because I weighed it before deciding if I could do the toe in the opal yarn. The purple yarn scrap had 12 to start and has 7 before starting the second sock, so that was 5 grams. The raspberry color used about 4 grams. So I would say that the stripes are using maybe 2.5 to 3 grams. The kale color, the green color, used about 4 grams. The blueberry color used about 6 grams, so it has an extra stripe compared to the other 2. The orange color used about 4 grams, and the sunflower used about 4 grams. So, yeah, I'd say it's like 2 to 2.5 grams per section of the sock. And then I'll check again after I finish the second sock and see if it's like comparable. More data, more information, especially since like being precise gram to gram is difficult. It's a little bit more difficult for my scale. When I finished these socks, which I'm hoping to do in March, it felt really reasonable yesterday. Now I haven't done any progress on them, so it feels less reasonable for some reason. I guess I thought I would get to the gusset yesterday, but I started yesterday in this orange section, so I actually did a ton. Just haven't done any knitting yet today because I've been filming, and we were out at the farm garden this morning. Anyway, when I finish this, I'm gonna cast on some socks for my sister whose birthday is in May. Part of my 12 cast ons was to knit 4 pairs of socks for my 4 siblings who still live at home on their birthdays or before their birthday. So I finished the blue socks for my brother whose birthday was earlier. He had the first birthday in the year, and my sister's birthday is in the beginning of May. And so I'd like to get her socks knit pretty quickly here. I thought I had time to finish my husband's socks, and now I'm starting to get antsy. I'd really like to have them done and in the mail by the end of April. That's reasonable. Okay. I think I can knit them in a month. She is like an 8th grader, so her feet aren't small, but I think I was thinking I'd make shorty socks since it's like summertime, that one might be fun to just like go with the season and with her birthday. So yeah, I'm using some of our yarn. This skein of yarn that we got was really, really tangled. So we wound it up and it's ready to go. Instead of like trying to hang it up for somebody else to deal with later, we just wound it up ourselves and dealt with it. We have another skein that's gonna be like that, but we haven't dyed it yet because we could tell before we dyed it, it was a mess. So I was like, well, when we know what I want, what color I want it, we can dye it up and then wind it ourselves. So, that's probably the biggest investment, is winding the tangled mess of socks, of yarn. This is a new color, and it is like a light gray silvery color, and I love it. It goes with all of other colors so well. However, we don't have a name for it, and so I will request you to share your ideas below, because we also run like a garden business and it's all like under one business. We enjoy coming up with garden names for the yarn, so that's part of the trick. The name should be something you can find at our garden. Now, I don't know that we grow any produce that this like gray, silvery gray. So we were trying to be creative ourselves, and my husband was like, well, it kind of looks like gravel, but we don't have gravel at our garden. Some people do though, so I wouldn't be opposed to that. I also think it kind of just looks like cement, but also my husband's like, we don't have cement at our garden, which is true. And I don't think very many people have a lot of cement at their garden. However, I think it looks, I said like dirty snow, like dirt in the snow, but dirty snow also sometimes has a yellow connotation, and this has no yellow meaning to it. But if people are thinking of yellow snow, that might be unappealing. And in the winter, snow on the garden gets dirty. So I like that, but also the idea of yellow snow is definitely unappealing. And then just today, I was thinking of like an old fence post. Like a faded, like used to be white, but is now weathered. Or, I don't know, was there another idea? I think that might be all. So if you have any ideas or preferences or thoughts on what we should name this yarn, feel free to leave it in the comments, and we'll use our discretion to choose a name. Yeah, I think that is the knitting related content. Surely that was plenty, right? A little bit of life stuff. Last weekend, we went as a family with my husband's family to Kearney, Nebraska to see the sandhill crane migration. It was cold. We chose ahead of time, about 4 to 6 weeks earlier, to go on these days in March, and they were the coldest days in March. It is currently 80 degrees warmer than it was when we were there last weekend. Then yeah, like high to high, like high temperature for that day to high temperature of this day. So that was a downside of our trip, but we still had a really good time. We still got to see the cranes. I'll pop in a picture. It was really beautiful. And we had a great time with our family. My daughter said on the way home, the 6-year-old, she said, Mama, the saddest part is that it is too far away to come back again very soon. And I thought that was just so sweet. Not that it was so cold, not, that this or that, the things that us, as the parents saw that didn't go so well. But yeah, our daughters and one of our sons were able to go with. Our other son wasn't feeling well, so he stayed home. Yeah, and my in-laws came, so we had a really good time. And now, yeah, it's just back to the regular work and homeschool and all of the activities. And it's warm now, so my husband wants to be out in the garden. Yeah, because we have a garden business. So, yeah, this morning we went out to the farm, which is like his grandma's farm, where we have a little part of our garden, and we tilled up more land and cleaned up last year's garden, and the girls and I came home for lunch. And he was out working later, but it was really good to make some like visible progress on getting some of the garden stuff ready for the year. That's always really encouraging. So yeah, we're into our busy season now because it is spring. So really exciting, but also a little bit stressful. So I think that's all I have to share today. Thank you for sticking with me and watching my making adventures, and God bless. Bye.